That's why there's this talk about firm contractual commitments to avoid a speculation challenge. And you know, the problem here isn't what are we going to do with the water. It's we need to get through water court so we can start doing with what the water using the water as the contract already provides.
So later you're going to try to do this.
Any other use other than the industrial use that's claimed in the application would require a brand new water court application.
That wasn't the question. Is that what you're trying to do next?
I've been requested to file an application for industrial use. He's asking if we get industrial use, are we then going to ask for municipal use?
If we had a contract, you bet. But we don't. You can't speculate, just as you said.
You can't
You're
get.
still going to base it on a district-wide 2 acre feet of people that irrigate feet maybe 3 circles a year and use 1/4 of an acre of water.
Again,
2 acre feet of water.
again,
And Joe Blow that works his butt off and waters the hell out of it, he's only going to get 2 acres.
again, you can't do it if you haven't got the use. That's what the state.
You just sit there and say,
That's what the state engineer has already discussed with us. You got to dry up what you irrigated.
well, okay, I've been irrigating and I've been raising about 1/4 of a ton of acre of feed. And I put on about 1/4 of an acre of water a year. But I've been watering it in years.
But the decree allows you to irrigate a more consumptive crop like alfalfa.
Right
That's
now.
not what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, what we're saying is right now, you got no protection from your neighbor irrigating a more highly consumptive crop. Conversely, with this conservative figure, you've got more protection than you would ordinarily.
Yeah, you just gave me 2 acre feet of water.
I'm sorry. I'm having trouble here.
According to what you're saying, you just gave me 2 acre feet of water and I only pumped 1/4.
But you could pump more than that and irrigate a different crop if you desired to do so. Well, but that's what I'm saying. You have.
For 10 years.
We're looking at what the decree allows you to do.
According to your consumptive use thing, I get 2 acre feet because I've been irrigating for 10 years.
No, 10 years
So I
has
just
nothing
dried
to do with
them
it,
up
sir.
because I just got 2 acre feet of water.
The decree allows you to irrigate a highly consumptive crop like alfalfa. And it covers the 35 CFS covers the depletions from a highly consumptive crop. You all could be irrigating alfalfa if you wanted to, and the plan covers that.
I understand that, but this district is not capable, as he can testify, Donnie can testify, anybody in here can testify that these wells are dropping. You go start taking.
What number? What number would you like? What number would you like?
Huh?
What number would you like?
I would like what you actually use, what you actually.
Well, that's what they.
On a crop, historically used, not on dead oats that are when they're getting water.
Well, the state did not require that. If you want to relitigate that, go ahead.
Well, we will.
Jump in.
Part of it.
Why would you do that?
Why would I do that? Because I like farming. I like having the water.
That's fine. And I'm not here to require you to do anything different. And if you're injured, we're going to monitor and prove that you aren't injured.
Just like they monitored Elcott District over there. That basin over there, they got monitoring holes, and don't tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, because I've been president of the board for 11 years. Those monitoring holes are all over here. All the wells that are being pumped are in the middle of the district. Those aren't dropping one little bit. In fact, they're going up. The ones in the middle, the cone of depression, just goes just like that. Don't tell me how that monitoring works. It doesn't work.
What would you do to prevent injury?
Well, you'd have to put monitoring holes all around your holes. And as soon as it starts dropping, shut the dang thing off.
The Black Squirrel is a designated basin.
Yes.
Okay. And their board is charged with preventing injury by statute. If they aren't doing a good job, then somebody can take them to court.
They're in court constantly.
Right, they are.
Well,
That's what we don't want to do here.
That's what I'm saying, we don't wanna do that here. You guys got a really good thing here, a really good thing if you're a farmer and you enjoy what you're doing. You've got an excellent thing. You start bringing in all this industrial bullshit, you're gonna just cut your own throats. You're all gonna die.
Well, there's a lot of people that I'm assuming want to protect their investment. And adding industrial use protects their investment.
No, that, as long as their pocket dries up in there.
maybe the discussion really should focus on how the membership could do what they want and protect itself and make sure it's meeting its obligations. So maybe the discussion should be, how can the membership get to the point of giving them some kind of approval, subject to meeting whatever criteria the association has to meet interchange of augmentation fees. That's possible. It's kind of a conditional type of approval, and the association has got to at least be monitoring the change of augmentation case to make sure that these issues don't come up, and when they do, that they have a discussion with the applicants about, okay, what are we going to do to prevent this from adversely affecting other members? You know, that's one of the obligations, is you got to make sure this doesn't injure other members in the exercise of their water rights. And is it possible, maybe the way to consider it is think about how can the association go about giving them the authority that they need, because when they go to court, they've got to prove that the association said, yes, you can amend our augmentation. And how to get to that point and meet the obligations under all these documents.
Wasn't that exactly what Carter was doing to all of us before this got taken care of? Take us to court, prove that. And it's also been said that from our area down to their place, it was just all of a sudden probably 300 to 800 years before he didn't get down to the injury. He's done that already, so wouldn't that just be adding the same scenario to the rest of us again as an association?
That's what you don't want to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so the question is, can they get there with their application without that happening to the rest of the members of the association?
Wasn't there something discussed about a temporary that you could get?
Yeah, there's something called a substitute water supply plan, which is available on a one-year basis. You don't have to go through court to do it. It's administratively approved. And it's available for, if you're changing your water rights, it allows you to use it for those change purposes for a limited period, year-to-year type basis. Some of those are required that it's pending a water court case. It also allows you to develop an augmentation plan while you've got an application before the court to get it approved. One of the questions we've had is how could this be done on a temporary basis through a substitute water supply plan without permanently amending the augmentation plan? I don't know yet. I don't know. If it's possible, if this is possible without injuring other members of the association, then great. Do it. I recommend you do it. But I recommend that you make sure those obligations are met. And you're right, you've got a sweet deal, which is what makes it kind of hard. To avoid messing up that sweet deal.
The easiest way, of course, would be to be a co-applicant, and then you've got control.
Yes, that is a way to do it. And if the costs to the association for being a co-applicant is spread out among the association members, yeah.
Well, we do.
But the association doesn't have contracts to do this, so.
Well, you do have the nexus, which is the decree.
I don't understand what you mean.
The association has the augmentation right. So that's why it would be natural for you to be a co-applicant. And we're the applicant that's paying for it, so the association wouldn't have to pay for it. And I welcome the analysis on injury. I am not worried about injury because I think he's done an extensive review of injury.
Is
But I
it
think in order,
injury
I think in order for you to keep control and to have a 1-year substitute supply plan, the easiest way would be to be a co-applicant.
But how could the association be a well, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
But to be a co-applicant to change everyone's right, or just a co-applicant to change yours?
Just the augmentation plan in those that have contracts. That's all.
Mhm. Or to monitor the case to make sure
Either
it's
way.
done.
I
Either
don't,
way, yeah.
you know, we've shared more information than I usually do during discovery. So, I mean,
Well-
we're not trying to hide anything here. We're trying to get people to understand that this is going to work.
And I understand that the applicant has provided information, has asked about what kind of criteria and is trying to do this without hurting anyone else.
Yeah, we're not here to be pirates.
Right. And at the same time, we're not here to
Yeah, and I mean.
say no, but the association has obligations it has to meet.
Yeah, and we've got a very small amount. I mean, the amount that we're talking about here is maximum of 500 acre feet. The drilling is not going to be 500 acre feet in the next 6 months for sure, or a year.
Now, the injury analysis that you completed, and I admit I haven't read through your report, but is the injury analysis based upon injury to other wells in the basin, other members, or is it just based upon injury to other water rights outside the association?
No, I'm sorry.
It's,
I'd like him to answer.
oh. Well, why don't you say
Sorry,
what
what
analysis you did perform, Austin?
Well, you have to start with the premise that your augmentation plan is operating in a sustainable manner,
Mhm.
okay? And we went out and looked at that, verified it with these monitor wells, okay? Now, obviously, we couldn't get to every monitor well, and as we talked about, there's going to be some variation across the basin. Some years you are going to see some wells drop. But as a whole, it appears, based on these hydrographs, that your augmentation plan is operating sustainably. Okay? Now, if you do this exchange, where you, based on information, as I talked about, from the Department of Agriculture, CU analysis on his property, if you take that depletion amount that you're currently using for irrigation, all you're doing is transferring that to an industrial use. Okay? You are maintaining the same status quo that you are currently operating under your augmentation plan.
Inside the basin.
Inside the basin.
That's right. Inside the
But you haven't done any analysis to determine whether that may currently be injuring members or other members in the association. You're just assuming that the augmentation plan was based upon it.
It assumes that the
The-
current augmentation plan doesn't prevent injury. I guess, I think everyone in this room would like to take that position, that the current aug plan doesn't cause injury. If it does, we got a problem.
I agree. I think that's what the association wants to avoid opening that question.
Well, and that's why we went through the monitoring well analysis. There has been stasis based on the operation of the current plan.
So if the current plan doesn't cause injury, if we don't increase depletions under what's authorized under the current plan,
Uh-huh.
how is there going to be injury?
Have you looked
How-
at timing differences in the use, if you're going to year-round use, what that might mean from an injury standpoint? Or what terms and conditions might be necessary to prevent the injury? That's really the question.
Current decree allows year-round pumping.
But it's not happening.
To some extent it is. There are, the pumping records do show many of the wells do pump year-round.
Okay, okay.
Meaning, you say?
I don't know the exact number, but I have looked cursory at some of the other wells just to see if there was winter pumping and there is
And
winter
remember, the
pumping.
Box Springs right was a winter storage right.
Yes. Now, you ask about, let me just say this, you ask about how is it going to affect if you go to year-round. In general, if you're pumping in a concentrated time period, and you're still limited in the same amount, but now you've taken that pumping and you've spread it out over a year, you're lessening the effect on the basin, not increasing it.
But there may be a timing.
Timing-wise,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, okay.
You know, it looks like the south farmers are the only ones that are irrigating the one.
Yeah.
Everybody else who's raising feed or alfalfa are not pumping any of that. Julianne, did you have any other things you wanted to discuss with the members?
No, I think, I assume most of you haven't had a chance to go through that 5-page list of criteria, let alone try to understand it, and I, you know, I understand that. I just, you know, the purpose for me to be here was to explain to you what the association's obligations are. And Mr. Fulton is right. If I will not be representing the association if it's a party to this change case, because there's already a prior agreement between Reed Cattle and the association about that, and Mr. Hillhouse has been hired to represent the association in the litigation. So when you switch to that mode, Mr. Hillhouse will be advised.
Well, there should be a way to work this out. If everyone is worried about just injury as opposed to theoretical concerns, the simplest way would be for the association to be a co-applicant, and that possibility is contained in the motion that's here before you. So I would suggest we pass the motion, and then you guys, as a second vote, decide whether you want the association to be a co-applicant or not.
And I'm not sure I agree with that. I understand the concept. I think the association, in the process, there's the potential for the interests of the applicant and the association becoming different. And because the association's obligation is not just to prosecute the application, but is to make sure the other members of the association aren't injured. But I agree, there may be a way to do this. And we're not saying no, or I'm not recommending that you say no. Obviously, this is a member vote, a shareholder. I'm just recommending that you be aware of the obligations that the association has, and I don't think all of them have been met to the point where you can say you will not oppose forever what they plan to do. And Mr. Poznanovic would agree with me. What may come out of this by the time they get through the litigation could be very different from the way it is now. That those things happen. And so it will be a process that the association will have to kind of watch to make sure those things don't happen. Yes.
Well, if the association decides that it falls in bed with them, how's the rest of the members going to be? Because all they're going to do is protect the 500, or their 500 acre feet. The rest of us will be sitting out here on our own then.
See, that's what I'm talking about. There may be a point where the association's interest in protecting the members from injury is...
But that's kind of like you represent two entities.
Exactly. An applicant in a water court case has the obligation to prove there's no injury. And it's hard to say, I can prove there's no injury, but I have to watch and make sure that what I'm proving is no injury. There is the potential for that conflict of interest. And that's why maybe being the co-applicant is not the best idea.
Julian, what if the association were to support a 1-year substitute water supply plan that did not involve a water court application, and then after we see how it works for a year, we talk again? Don't kick me under the table here, Mr. Paul.
There's potential for that, yes. I mean, I think whether you're talking about a substitute water supply plan or changing the augmentation plan, the injury issue's going to have to be met. It would certainly be quicker and easier to find out if there's any fatal flaws, yes.
The same proposal would apply, I mean, obviously the the substitute water supply plan would not, we wouldn't be having 500 acre feet of industrial use pumping over the next 12 months. It would be some lesser amount, but it would show that the 2 acre foot per acre concept works.
Or doesn't.
Or doesn't. I
There's
mean,
that,
it
yeah,
would go in.
there's that possibility. There's
we-
also, there's several other possibilities I've been trying to think of how to allow members to do this without messing up the augmentation.
Well-
Maybe it's one of those ways where it goes through a substitute water supply plan for a year to see how it goes through the process, see what could happen, and there's no fatal flaws and everything seems to be working. It might turn out to be a long-term deal that can be done.
And the great thing about a substitute supply plan is the state always will be quick to tell you, there's no precedential value of the state approving a substitute supply plan. You've got your year, see how it works,
And
and
a
you
conditional
go from there.
approval by the association, and when I say conditional approval, I mean, yeah, we say you can go forward, but you have to make sure all these criteria are met along the way, is easier to do with a substitute water supply plan. I agree.
And, we've got an engineering report that we're going to apply to the water court case with a permanent amendment, but the concept would apply equally because we are going to go year to year anyway, even under a water court case, where every year you decide if you're in for industrial use or you're not. Well, here we're just doing it on a 1-year basis, see if the plan works or not in over a 1-year period.
And then we could work with you on this list and begin to chip away at the things that really would matter to the rest of the members.
But we gotta have a, we're starting from here, the resolution.
Yeah, I know. You'll have to tell us if we could do that type of thing given this notice.
I mean, I think if filing for a substitute water supply plan while a water court case is pending would fall under, what we asked for the special meeting for. So I think if we are not going to pursue the water court application and rather just do a 1-year SWSP, that seems within the scope of what purpose for the special meeting was for.
That's certainly an easier thing to do, I agree. At least with respect to identifying some of these horrible threats that nobody wants to happen. I would assume that Mr. Millhouse would represent the association through the substitute water supply planning process. And, as the representative of the association, my advice is you want to avoid the Burlington ditch case, which is a case that happened a few years ago, very recent, where someone wanted to do a ditch-wide consumptive use analysis, which is not exactly what they're talking about, but is similar.
Close.
And it bit every single shareholder in the ditch company, and it cost
Not
the
even
attorney
close.
his job, and nobody wants it. Avoid that at all costs.
That was a change of water rights case, and again, the court doesn't have jurisdiction over change of water rights.
But her point is valid. We're trying to get along here. We're not trying to.
Right.
We're not trying to partition the right.
Yeah, and I, from a procedural standpoint, can the shareholders say, well, we don't want to go with that motion, we want a little different motion, or a little different type of approval? Procedurally, if you do it and no one complains, what's the harm? If someone complains, then maybe you can deal with it then, but that's up to the association. That's a procedural issue. It may be something that I think the association wants to avoid the cost of calling more and more shareholder meetings like this, because that costs the association money to do. So maybe what the association wants to do is to consider something a little different, considering some kind of conditional. We will help you to the extent you can, as long as you're meeting these criteria in the substitute water supply plan, as long as we can just kind of go along and watch it and make sure these things don't happen, or if they do, how do we deal with it? Yeah, you've got to decide procedurally. The law says that you're only to consider the matter in the agenda. Can you change it a little bit and still be within the scope? I mean, you guys would be the ones to complain, so
I think a substitute supply plan request within the scope of filing that after you've got a water court application pending, that's within the scope of the notice. The notice purpose is everyone needs to know there's going to be a vote on whether we're going to modify the OG plan to allow for industrial use. If we want to now talk about a 1-year modification for industrial use, from my perspective, it seems to fall under the same scope. Everyone knew the reason to come here, and frankly, it's for less of a time period than what we were asking for originally.
So, but my recommendation to the association would be, don't agree to never oppose either the substitute water supply plan or the augmentation plan, but consider some kind of a conditional, go forward, let's see how this works, but you still have to meet all the criteria so that the association is meeting its obligation. And, that's up to the shareholders how you guys want to do it.
The proposal is so that the state would be able to propose terms and conditions. We've got a report that says, here's what our plan is. You can't get more expansive than what the report provides. We're not going to say, okay, well, you know what? We should actually ask for 2.5 acre-feet per acre. The best we're going to get is 2 acre-feet per acre. If through the course of the negotiations with the state, if they propose something more restrictive, that's something we'd have to talk about if we could live with. But, you've seen the scope of what we're asking for. We're not proposing to ask for anything more than what the report provides for. So I think, we've already got some boundaries on where it can go. It could only be what we're asking for or more restrictive.
And I agree. You have put some boundaries around what you're doing. I don't think there are enough to protect the association, but I don't think it's, no, you can't ever do this. We've got to make sure these things are done. So.
What happens to the water code application then, Matt?
Well,
They can't just stay, because then all the opposers are going to get in, and this is from experience. If you're going to end up withdrawing an application, do it early before anybody spends money on it, because then you have to get everyone's approval, and they're going to want their attorney's fees and engineering fees paid at some point in time. Does anybody else have questions? I want to assure the association